Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the McMahon Group. Thanks for joining us today. I read the most compelling, powerful book last night. I couldn't put it down. It's called Checking Out, an in-depth look at losing your mind. Catherine Graves joins us today. Catherine, first of all, welcome, and thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
When I was reading this, I thought, what vulnerability you had to put yourself out there and to put your story out there. So let's start with the beginning of the story. John, your husband that is now deceased, basically you were married and you thought he's having an affair on me. He has this erratic behavior. Tell us about that.
I did. I thought he was having an affair or maybe several affairs for a while. His behavior had changed dramatically just over a several months period of time where I didn't really know where he was all the time, and he wasn't really excited about answering questions from me. They were just kind of a lot of I don't knows, and so I ended up hiring a private investigator to follow him.
Which I think a lot of people would do. If it's not making sense, you got to fill in the blanks somehow.
Yeah, it's something you don't think you'd ever do, and you hear stories about and or see movies about it. But I really didn't understand where the time was going and what was happening. We had a business together that we were running, and there was jobs that weren't getting completed. Just things had changed significantly, and I thought someone or more than someone is taking up his time, his extra time.
Were you asking him specifically, are you cheating on me?
I asked him several times, and he would just laugh and say no. So that made it even more suspicious because he wasn't willing to really go there with the answer.
And it ended up being something that was so unknown to you and to most people out there.
Yeah, even to our counselor. We were in marriage counseling during this time, and the counselor had suggested that at one point that he go to Sierra Tucson because he seemed so depressed and lethargic. And so we had that planned, and then for about a week from that point, and then within those few days before that, he was unable to finish his sentences, and he was sleeping all the time. He had stopped eating and drinking, and the counselor thought maybe he was having a nervous breakdown. So get him to Sierra Tucson as quickly as we could. So
emotional.
Totally emotional. So I took him to Sierra Tucson, and they were unsure whether or not they could keep him there and suggested that I stay in a hotel nearby for the night. And I was determined to keep him there. I just wanted to fix him and give him back to me in 30 days and find out what's wrong, and then, and call me then. And he didn't really even understand what he was doing or where he was going, and he couldn't fill out the paperwork. And so they were observing things that I hadn't even observed, that he couldn't remember our children's names on the paperwork. And
so they knew this was more serious.
They had a feeling that it was.
So you got the call. You got the call.
I got the call the next morning to go to the emergency room. They were taking him for a CAT scan. And
what did they find?
They found a huge tumor in the front left lobe of his brain, which explained why that's your front left lobe of your brain is where your personality and kind of who you are. That represents who you are. And so that explained everything. And which in some ways, immediately it was a relief. But then 2 seconds later, when you realize what it actually is, and then I said, how do we find out if it's benign or if it's malignant? And the doctor, Catherine Sander, at the emergency room, said it's malignant and it's terminal. And by this time, John had fallen back asleep, so he was completely unaware of what was going on.
So you were on your own to deal with this?
Pretty much, yeah.
So you bring him back home. He's on hospice, and he passes away. You go into... Initially, you said in your book that everything was okay, it was fine, it really wasn't affecting you much.
Right. I thought that maybe during the 6 months, this is about 6 months before he passed away from the time of his diagnosis, and I really thought that I had grieved him during that time. I was convinced that was, because we didn't have a connection anymore, and he wasn't really the same John that I was used to being with, and so I thought that was enough. And when he passed away, I kept our company running, kept the business, and started dating about 4 or 5 months after he passed away, which was a huge mistake, in my opinion. For me it was, and for my children, because I really alienated my family.
But it was the distraction, it was the focus that you could put your energy on when you weren't ready to deal with what had happened.
Absolutely.
So how did you finally deal with what had happened?
I finally went and got some help. About 1.5 years after he passed away, I just stopped. One day I started crying, and I didn't stop for about 4 days. And I didn't get out of bed, and I didn't take phone calls, and my children were really worried about me and called a friend of mine and said, I'm really worried about our mom. And so then they called the therapist I had been seeing. on occasion, and she said, "You need more help than I can really give you right now. You're really, really in a bad place." And so that's when I did decide to get some really intensive therapy. It was an outpatient therapy.
Okay, and so you got your therapy, and one of the things about the book that's so powerful also is that your children, Caroline and Alex, are such a part of the book.
They really are.
And I have a teenager myself, and they are so outspoken about their feelings and their vulnerability in the book too. And I just want to read one of the quotes from Caroline talking about you as her mother. She says, "Catherine Graves is the strongest woman anyone will ever meet. She has gone through a whirlwind of bad events and has come out a completely changed person. I respect her so much, appreciate everything that she does for my brother and me, commend her for making it through what has happened, and love her to the moon and back for being the best mom I could ever ask for." I get choked up reading this because having a teenager, so often they don't even want us in the same room as them.
Right.
But they're so
This has changed. Yeah, well, I have to say they weren't, and they are now, and it really changed our lives completely in our relationship. It's better now than it was prior. Mm-hmm. And we all had a really good relationship before John got sick, and John was the glue of our family for certain.
Right.
But it really...
And now it sounds like you're the glue of the family for certain. Tell us about your book signing.
Oh, I'm having a book signing June 2nd at Changing Hands Bookstore.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing your story. I know you've probably piqued a lot of interest out there today with the book. You can certainly see Catherine June 2nd, and you can pick up the book. It's a great read. We'll be right back after the break.